This is the Vision 79 podcast, where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sander's is 40, mine is 39, and together we have a shared vision for success in business and personal life. Many successful people have started small, just like us, but very few of them have documented their early years, though they often say they wish they had. And given we believe in learning lessons from others, we intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. Today, we'll discuss the difference between cockiness and competence, what makes a cocky person so annoying and a confident one so respected, how to lean into your confidence while avoiding coming across as an ass, and much more. But first, we like to start every podcast with a brief update of our business and personal lives so that we can tell in the future roughly where we're at in our life right now. What do you have for business this week?
For business, I would love to say that podcast 34 is scheduled, but it is only half scheduled because although I ran Spotify all night last night on my laptop, it still has not uploaded. So Apologies for 33 continuing to be delayed. It has the same issue. 34 is
33 is delayed on Spotify?
Right now it is, yeah, because it won't go.
Got it.
So I'm going to try that today.
I bet both our Spotify listeners are real upset about that.
They're like, they haven't
you
posted
and
in weeks. But apologies for 33 and 34 being delayed. Doing what we can to get them up. 33 at least by today has to be. And 34 to schedule for Tuesday. But anyways, sales and use tax was filed for Kahuna Cravings.
Thank you.
Which is a great bing bong moment. That was well overdue. It was not very challenging. Essentially filled out my name and our business info and then put $0 for the
we did overpay last time because we had a penalty.
True.
So it should have covered the penalty from this time because we planned ahead.
Right. That's right. That's that forward thinking.
Yeah.
You created a very nice next steps priority Excel sheet.
Thanks.
That goes over the documents we have coming up, as well as their completion rate and what needs to be done next. It's a much easier screen to look at when you're trying to see what's in review, what needs to be reviewed, what comments are there, stuff like that, instead of scrolling through a 20-page next steps tracking document that lists out all the changes needed for every single document. So definitely appreciate that change and have made good use of it this week, working on a number of documents related to employee stuff, related to training stuff, related to bonus stuff, to insurance stuff, to you can probably add in on that. I'm blanking out. But there's at least, I think, about 10 documents on that list when I looked last night that were hadn't been touched this week, but were touched by the end of this week. So just a few like heavy hitter general bullet points. That's what I have in that respect. And then that's all I have for business. I have one personal thing, but that's it.
Yeah. We started off with what we call the next steps tracking document, which is a list of documents. Sander started it. It's a Word doc. It's just a list of documents that we have to create. So it has the name of the document, what's left to do on it, and what the completion percentage is. And at first, that was a really great way of tracking everything because we have 45 different folders with 1,000 documents. So that was a great way of like laying a roadmap out. And you can scroll through that document and see what is at what completion status and what needs to be done on it still. We've got comments dropped and links to those documents. But as we're getting closer, I'm calling it the grind to the line. Closer to actually executing these things, we had to prioritize some documents over the others. Like pick the critical ones that absolutely need to be done. And the easiest way that I work is through list format. So I made a Google sheet with just a list of those titles with completion status. And what I like about this one is it's got the person who's working on the document and then whether or not it's ready for review, and then when the next person reviews it, what their name is and what their comments are.
And what notes we have for each other too.
Right. Because
in form of either comments or in the column.
Right. So because previously the only way to know who was working on what was by either dropping a comment or sending an email.
And comments get missed and emails are blurry.
Yeah. And they take a lot of time too by writing an email.
I mean, I remember I'm sure that you would agree, but it probably takes a solid 45 minutes at least to like draft a good email about like
what you did
1 or 2 day work.
Yeah.
So it's like a really good chunk of time, and it's a good email. Like it's got links, hyperlinks, and it's well thought through, and it's very easy to read through.
Yeah.
And emails have their place, but for simple stuff, the documents can just be checked through a sheet. I think is a lot easier, especially since a lot of the time-consuming aspect of the email, at least from my experience, was getting all the document names in there with the hyperlinks included.
Yep.
And when that part's already done in a sheet, and you can just reference that one sheet to look at X, Y, and Z things or whatever, it makes it a lot simpler.
You can also sort them by priority order. So, or by completion status.
Yep.
And in the Google Doc, you can't really shift rows really.
Yeah, I actually tried to do that the last time I updated the next steps tracking document. I tried to order it by like least completed to most completed, but like it's constantly changing. And so you're sitting there copying and pasting and recopying and pasting. And it's like, what is this worth? Like, this is just silly.
Right. Well, and another reason it's difficult in the Google Doc is because we have it categorized by sector. So it's like finance documents, XYZ, employee documents, XYZ. And in the Google Sheet, it's like, I don't care what it falls under. Like, this is a priority 5. Go do it right now.
Right.
Which is nice. And then also, the most recent update I made last night was I have in the completion, there's a percent completion column. And if it's 100% all the way on the right, it says completed. But if it's at like 80 or 95%, and we've reviewed it, but we can't complete it until we complete a different doc. Instead of completed, it says it's got a dependency, and then it says what documents it's dependent on for finishing. So I've gone through, we've got like 5 dependency ones. It's like they're so close to being finished, 5%. They need a little bit.
They're dependent on each other too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are.
Yeah.
So now I've gone through and I found the common denominator, and now that's the document that I'm working on. So once that's done, then you can like get 3 of them done at the same time. So it's a combo deal.
100%.
That's my business updates. We've got a milestone meeting that we should schedule for this upcoming week. We were going to schedule it for Thursday or Friday of this week, but it had to get pushed a little bit. So I want to talk to our guy and see if we can get that scheduled sometime this week. What is your life update?
My only life update is that I have slacked on Quicken as of recently, and I went back through just this month, not going way back, but just this month.
How many months have you been not recording?
I mean, I've been off and on for probably about 4 months. So it's like some stuff I look at a glance or record, but I haven't been like diligent about it in probably 4 months ish. So I'm trying to be diligent about it. What
did you find?
I'm spending a lot more money on Kratom, which is something that I knew, or kava bars. Yeah. Which is something that I knew and recognized, and am dialing back on. In addition to that, I also recognized before I did this that I was spending more on like vending machines at work because I get bored and I want to snack on something. Yeah. And so I've been slacking on going to the grocery store. I see that my grocery from Publix bill is less, but I see that my vending machine bill is more. Yeah. So it's like, it's probably smarter to just go to the grocery store and get real shit instead of overpriced crap at the vending machine. So a couple things that I was speculative of but didn't have numerical data to back up. So I'm glad I did the Quicken thing so that I can like track it genuinely. Yeah. And I found a subscription that I didn't know I had. So that was useful too. Cool. That was $25 a month. So I canceled that.
Yeah. I have a $70 annual subscription to the Calm app to help me fall asleep that I meant to cancel after the free trial, but forgot about. And I have for a full year. So if you want to use Calm, I can give you my login info because I decided after 4 days that I didn't want to use it, and then I forgot to cancel the subscription.
Dude, there's some things that have like a 3-day trial, and I'm like, oh, fuck, this is sketchy. Like this is, it's like you're sitting there with a 3-day trial, and it's like $120 for 3 months, and you're like, I better remember to fucking do this. Like I have to remember to cancel this. You know?
I started using my Google Calendar like in the past few months, and part of the reason I did it is because I set a reminder in my reminders app on my phone to cancel Calm, and I don't compute with the reminders app.
I've aged now, and I have matured beyond my initial love for the reminders app. I now fucking hate it.
Welcome.
The reminders get cluttered in together, and then I just don't read them because I see the little red notification by reminders. It's like, it's probably old stuff. It's fine. And then it like ends up being really important shit, and I look at it like a day later, and I'm like, well, fuck, I guess that's late.
What do you use to schedule now?
I'm working on that part.
Okay, if you'd like a recommendation, let me talk about my life update because this integrates. So I use Google Calendar. I've never used a planner in my entire life. I was the kid in high school with the backpack with all the loose papers crammed into the bottom.
You know,
that
was
was
funny.
me.
I used to be the planner kid.
That
I was so I had so many folders and like blah blah blah, and now I am the crunched paper kid.
Yep.
Like I just stuff it in the bag.
We've reversed. I was the crunched paper kid until sophomore year of college, where I was like, if I don't uncrinkle these papers, I'm not going to have a job. And then I got my head out of my ass. I started using the Florida Tech calendar to plan my days out. But after graduating, I was like, every day is the same. I go to an office job and it's a routine. It's wake up in the morning, want to kill yourself, leave work. But now to schedule my life outside of work, I'm using the Google Calendar, which I find really helpful because I can have it open all the time on my computer and open all the time on my phone, and it sends updates to both. So when I have something coming up, so like I have the Vision 79 podcast in here. So there was a reminder on my phone 30 minutes before the podcast that popped up like a text notification that told me I had the podcast. And I was like, awesome. So I really love that. But also it's linked to your Gmail, which is my main email account. So when I make a schedule appointment with someone, like I had a doctor's appointment this last week, that's actually part of my life update, I guess. I'm seeing a doctor now because I haven't seen a doctor in 4 years.
I have to go see a doctor too.
I haven't seen a doctor in 4 years.
I don't think I have either.
But I scheduled that appointment with my Gmail, and Google saw that and automatically added it to my calendar.
That's nice.
Which is sick. And my ultimate goal is to update all of my contacts in my phone and then export that from Apple to Google and then have my contacts be based in Google, not Apple. So that
I actually have something similar to say about that. Have you utilized the new connect your iPhone through Bluetooth to your Windows computer feature of Windows 11? You can connect to your iPhone to your computer so that text message alerts and other alerts come in on your computer, even if you have an iPhone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Don't do it.
Okay.
It is terrible. It is so
Really?
horrible. I hate it so much.
Why?
Because the problem is that as soon as you open up your laptop, if you have like 20 unread notifications, which is classic for me, I open up my laptop and they go to the bottom and they show one at a time. And it does it like every 5 seconds. It'll show you the next one.
Oh my God.
So your bottom like right-hand corner of the screen is completely handicapped for like the first 5 minutes that you use your laptop.
Yeah.
And even if you try to X them out, sometimes they don't work, or sometimes they'll delay, or sometimes they won't slide out.
Right.
And you can't, like, if you have piled up notifications, even if you start to X them out, the next one will slide right in and block whatever you're trying to click in that bottom corner.
Jesus
so you
Christ.
really just got to sit there with your thumb in your ass until these notifications clear.
Can you
And it is
disable it?
incredibly frustrating. Yes, you can. I disabled it by turning off Bluetooth, but that doesn't work when I want to use my headphones with my computer.
Right.
So I have to go into the app and actually do it.
I'll be sure to never enable that feater.
It's
But also, like,
it's a valiant effort to those of you at Windows who are definitely watching, but it is subpar.
Well, in 40 years when we're billionaires, everyone's going to go back and see, like, man, how did these guys do it? And they'll be like, oh, well, they did it by complaining about Windows. But
Yeah.
I think I get way less notifications than you do because I try to cut out as much crap as possible.
Which is why my a lot of times my responses will be so delayed because I get so fed up with the volume of shit that gets notified to my phone from just everyone. Random people will text me about random stuff throughout the day. People I haven't heard of in months. Yeah, they'll text me something. And it's I just don't feel like responding. No offense to them. I hope that you're watching and supporting and I still care about you. But it's it gets when I'm driving somewhere and I can't respond to all these texts and stuff, I just back it up and then I push it off and I focus on my own stuff. And then I have a big back pile of notifications that I respond to in one quick succession with a bunch of short responses. And so I just get annoyed with it.
I've talked to 7 people since Thursday, and that's including you and Grace.
If you will text me in the morning and not text me by the end of the day, you will be you will be 2 screen widths to the bottom.
That's insane, dude.
I have approximately a dozen different people that will text me on any given day.
From top to bottom, that's Jace, who I messaged 10 minutes ago. That's Callie from Friday.
Wow.
In 1 screen width.
That entire screen width will be all today, and then there's a very high likelihood that if I scroll another screen, it will all be from today and a little bit of yesterday.
How do you know so many people?
I don't know.
Are these people that you communicate regularly with, or are these people who come out of the woodworks?
That we know. They just
Really?
text me.
That's so funny because none of them text me. I don't think half of them have my number, but I don't. That's not really particularly by design. It's just like
it's also like family will text me randomly and like old friends. And
I think my parents are getting divorced, and I don't even text them that much. Most of that's just phone calls. Anyways, on to the rest of my life updates. I'm rallying all of my old FIT crewmates around this Space Coast crew effort in an attempt to revitalize that team, which is a ton of fun because I work with Justin. So every day at work, I can go up to his desk and just talk about rowing with him and then give him a bunch of assignments to do, and then he'll go do those afterwards. So I've got him coaching now, but I also have him creating a Google Drive folder in that Discord I was telling you about. And like, we're hiring a new head coach and he's like kind of doing all that. So it's like he gives me a 1 hour daily brief on company time and then he goes and does all this stuff. It's awesome. But I've got Christian who was
done on company time during lunch break.
That's right. Our last guest on the podcast, Christian, who I rode with in college, he had a podcast called the Redliners Podcast. And it was called the Redliners because the FIT rowing uniform were red and white stripes, kind of like the Where's Waldo uniform. And so they've got red lines on them, but also we're athletes who push it to the absolute limit, like a red line in a car. Yeah. So we're called the Redliners. He had a podcast because he wanted to preserve the culture and the experience of rowing at Florida Tech when he was in college, but he stopped doing it when he graduated because he didn't have anyone to support him. And so I told him, listen, dude, I'm rallying our entire family to go help Space Coast. Come with us, bring back the Redliners podcast, start promoting Space Coast Crew. And then we can turn Space Coast Crew into a feeder program for Florida Tech so we can help the team that I love and many of my alumni love too because I've gotten them to go coach, but also our team. Yeah, and he's on.
We can throw in Space Coast Crew link in this description as well.
Not yet. It's such a fucking wreck, dude. Yeah. Half the reason I'm doing this is because the board overturns every 2 or 3 years, right? Because they're parents. And they're also parents. So they have a full-time job and kids in sports. Yeah. And they're managing this team. So they use SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, iCrew, the Crew app, email. The website sucks. It's a fucking wreck. So I'm having Justin systemize it. So it's going to be our website is real simple, and it's got a link that says if you want access to our Discord, submit your form here. And then if we can verify that you're a parent or an actual rower, we'll give you a link to the Discord. You fill out a questionnaire, and it automatically assigns you to the proper chats in the Discord, and then we disperse all information from there. And in that Discord, there's links to Google Drive folders with relevant information, and everything's based in Google Drive. So only the board members have access to everything, and then if you're like a rower, you only have access to like 1 or 2 of the bottom folders with like resources.
Got it.
But I'm going to revamp everything with Justin and build that team into something awesome. But it's fun because I get to give like 35 minutes a day to it outside of work, and that's a lot of fun.
Did you play Where's Waldo as a kid?
Not really.
You didn't have like the Where's Waldo books?
No, I had I Spy.
I had I Spy too, but I liked Where's Waldo too. That was fun. Did you ever, like when you, it's not just Waldo that you're looking for. There's also a bunch of other little like characters and trinkets that you're looking for. So there's like, Where's Waldo? There's Where's Waldo's wife, who's a yellow version of like the red Where's Waldo. There's a key that you look for. There's a pair of eyeglasses that you look for. So there's like a bunch of little different trinkets. It was actually really fun.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude, have you seen...
It's a lot more similar to I Spy than just finding Waldo because there's a bunch of little stuff that you look for.
I didn't know that. But also, I had the I Spy book. I only saw Where's Waldo like in the back of a magazine in the shitter.
Got it.
That's the only spot.
I had a whole Where's Waldo book. Like each page was a different scene. And then I think I had 2 or 3 I Spy books. And they were like all different themes. Like some of them were pirate themed, some of them were like city themed, and like blah, blah, blah. That was fun.
Did you have any Spot the Difference books?
No, I don't think so. I think I only did those like, back in the day on Instagram, that was really popular. You like scroll through. I did those, Spot the Difference things, but those were relatively easy.
Those were really fun. I liked those a lot until I got to 6th grade where there were like a bunch of books in the classroom and I found one. But it was a prank book because every picture was the same. Yeah. And I had lost my fucking shit. I hated it so much. And it scorned them forever. But have you seen Lionel Messi's Bodyguard? He is like the I Spy fucking king. Like everywhere they go, he's like looking all around. He's He's some kind of like Middle Eastern. So he's got this crazy brow ridge that makes it look like he's always scowling.
Yeah.
And like he is on alert at all fucking times.
I've seen him like spot people coming down
Yeah.
that like no one would be able to see.
Dude, yeah.
And he like the way that he's able to move around Messi and move the other bodyguards, like Messi doesn't even notice that there's a problem.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Have you seen the one where someone like tries to wrap their arm around him for a picture and he just picks their arm off before it even touches him? Dude, so sick. That's so sick. Lionel Messi, I think he's like one of the richest people on earth or something. So like
he's definitely one of the best soccer players, despite the critics in the comments who will probably say that he's just an underwear model, which I've heard before.
That's fucking hilarious.
Don't really understand.
Is he really one of the best?
I mean, I don't know a lot about soccer, but from what I understand and see, and just looking at it from an outside perspective and how far he's come, I think you'd be hard pressed to get as far in soccer or football, and also be as successful and also be as desired of a player if you were just a model.
That's fair.
So that's my take on
I know 3 names in soccer. There's Ronaldo, who I think is Brazilian.
I'm not sure.
There's Messi.
We're very educated on this topic.
There's Messi, who's got his awesome bodyguard. And then I know David Beckham because I saw a Netflix documentary about how he was really talented but didn't work hard and just laid pipe in the Spice Girls. And then like got booted from soccer and like cried about it or something. I don't know. I don't know.
No, Ronaldo and Messi.
Okay. My last life update is I learned about Colossus the other day. Do you know what Colossus is? Colossus is a company that's bringing mammoths back from extinction.
Oh, was this on the Joe Rogan?
I don't think he's done Joe Rogan, but they talk about him on Joe Rogan.
Yeah. They one of the guys I listened to, maybe it was Graham Hancock talking in a Joe Rogan interview like that. I think there was a recent one with Graham Hancock, and I thought that they mentioned this.
I know Forrest Galante mentioned this guy like a year ago. I've relearned about Colossus 6 times, and I love it every time because I forget it exists.
Got it.
But what they're doing is they're bringing mammoths back from extinction because the Siberian wilderness is like frozen over. Yeah. And if you introduced mammoths, they'll start to till the earth and like bring more vegetation, which will reduce the impact of carbon emissions on the planet.
Well, another thing too is that they're hoping to bring back mammoths because they pack the snow down as well. Like if you put them in like the Arctic or something like that. Mm-hmm. So yes, they can like, create more greenery in that sense too. But there's also the theory that if you put them like on the Arctic, they can pack the snow down and make it flatter so that it's more reflective. So it reflects more of the sun's light back into space, which reduces global warming and stuff like that too. So there's that aspect of it too that I heard. Very interesting stuff.
Do you know how they do it?
How mammoths walk?
No, how they're bringing back mammoths?
Yeah, it's like through an elephant, right?
Yeah. So they take the genome.
I'm sorry. I mean, it's through Chase's mom.
Nice. they take the genome of an Asian elephant. Did you know that Asian elephants are more closely genetically related to mammoths than Asian elephants are to African elephants?
Can you, no.
Isn't that crazy? Asian elephants are further apart from African elephants than from mammoths.
Really?
Yeah.
That's wild.
So they edit the genome of a Asian elephant to more closely resemble that of a mammoth because they've collected DNA from petrous bones, which are inner ear canal bones from mammoth remains in the permafrost.
Yeah.
And then they will implant that embryo, the genetically edited embryo, into an Asian elephant. And that elephant will give birth to a mammoth.
Wow.
They're also bringing back a dodo bird.
I heard this.
Do you know what's even crazier about this?
I think I know why.
The way they do this is they take a chicken. They take a chicken egg. Yeah. And they inject the genetics into that embryo, right?
Yeah.
That chicken hatches into a chicken. And then that chicken has an egg that will hatch as a dodo bird.
Whoa.
And they do that with ducks right now. So there has been a chicken that has given birth or laid an egg that has hatched into a duck.
That's wild.
And that's how they're bringing dodos back.
I think I heard that they're bringing back the dodo because
shits and giggles.
Shits and giggles. No, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But another reason is that, so it's essentially a PR campaign. So they can be like, hey, it took so much effort to bring back this animal that we made extinct. let's focus on not making any more extinct, because this process is very hard, very time consuming, and very expensive. And these animals are amazing. Let's protect them. It's essentially a PR stunt, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
It's one of like the coolest PR stunts if you can think of one.
Fucking Jurassic. Dude, I so badly, my passion for jungle keepers is equal by my passion for Colossus and dinosaurs. I'm so excited. I want to live long enough to see the first dinosaur come back. I want to. And I know that it's possible. Right now, they're like, oh, yeah, well, like, you know, it's really difficult from fossils because there's no genetic whatever, but there's amber out there. I know it can be done. I just saw something in my Instagram reel of like a ancient bird feather trapped in amber. There's got to be DNA in there. I want to see it so bad.
Actually, yeah, amber is actually really good at preserving DNA and like smaller life forms.
Have you seen the gecko trapped in amber from like 62 billion years ago?
No.
62 billion years. It's a full ass gecko. It's like this big.
Really?
It's like if you took, I guess you never knew my brother's leopard gecko, but like it's like if you took a gecko from today and like dropped him in amber, it looks exactly like that.
Wow.
It's crazy how little they've evolved over billions.
And how little that has decayed over the years too.
Yeah.
I mean, not at all, I would assume.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no room inside the amber for like new oxygen or bacteria or whatever to get in. So
you could bring those geckos back from extinction.
Yeah. Maybe if you just crack that amber or melt it, you'll just pop up.
You start walking around.
Yeah, maybe.
You know what's crazy is alligators, when they go into hibernation, you've seen the lakes freeze over with alligators inside. They like stick their noses just above it. They slow their heartbeat down to like 1 beat per 5 minutes.
Whoa.
So not that gecko could do it because there's no oxygen in there.
I saw a guy in New York when I was like 8, and it was like this homeless guy that had figured out how to meditate and slow his heartbeat down, and people would pay him to slow his heartbeat down to 1 beat per 10 seconds. And they would like watch it on a little monitor, and that's how he made money as a homeless guy.
And you're sure? Wait,
I don't know if this was a prank or not.
Whose heartbeat setup was this? Was it his?
Was the homeless guy would slow his heartbeat down. I know where you're going with this.
was it his computer? And did he have a button in his pocket?
There's definitely the potential for that. But
he also could have been injecting fentanyl with this hand to slow his heartbeat down, and he's just got his tolerance.
It's a constant balance between how much drugs he's taking and how much he's dying.
Yeah,
and that's
he's
like,
want to see my heartbeat slow down? And you're like, pulls the cap out of the needle.
You want to see my heart stop?
Okay, so that's my life update and my business update. Are you ready to get into today's main theme?
I am ready to tin into today's tinging.
Okay. Today's episode is on cockiness versus confidence. The line between cockiness and confidence is a fine one. If you're too cocky, you're hated. And if you're too confident, you might get caught with your pants down and look like an idiot. I'd like to define cockiness and confidence independently and then critically determine the difference between the two. So the first one I want to dive into is cockiness. But before that, I just want to talk about the reason that I want to talk about this in general. And I think it really stems from the fact that in high school, I thought I was confident, but I was actually just an ass a lot of the time. I think that overconfidence really blended into cockiness super easily, but only in areas where I didn't have expertise. Because in the areas that I knew I was good, I was more humble. But I felt that in areas I wasn't as good at, I overcorrected.
Yeah, it's a overcorrection. It's a supplementation for a lack of skill that gives the aura of competence.
Yep.
You know,
I remember
I've seen it.
I remember the first time I can recall this vividly was when I was rowing. There's two styles of rowing. There's rowing with one oar and then rowing with two. Rowing with two is harder to do. It's more advanced. So on my high school team, only like the juniors were allowed to try it and only the seniors were allowed to race it. And as a sophomore, my coach, it was like the right before practice and like someone didn't show up that day. And so we were scrambling to change shit around. And the coach was like, Mason, can you and Sebastian row in a boat with two oars? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, have you done it before? And I was like, lots of times. And she was like, really? You're only a sophomore? And I was like, mm-hmm. But like, you know, head coach lets me do it. He's already on the water at this point, so she doesn't know that he doesn't know. And she was like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, if we get out there and I find out that you don't know what you're doing, I'm going to make you come back on land and I'm going to make you do like a fucking horrific workout. You're not leaving till 8 p.m. tonight. And I was like, no, I got this. And she was like, okay. you're taking out the double. And I was like, got it. So I turned around and I walked over to my friend who I had just signed up for this, who also had never rode with 2 Rs before. And I was like, okay, hear me out. And he was not on board. He was like, we've never done this. We don't even know how it's done. So I remember I stole the head coach's rowing magazine that he was reading before practice that day. And we went to the bathroom and we were looking at photos of people who were rowing with two oars to try and figure out like what hand goes on top of the other and like try to figure out the fundamentals. And I was like shitting bricks because I was like, you could flip really easily. I've never flipped in a boat, so I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to fix a boat that's flipped with 2 oars, let alone 1. So like I was really shitting bricks, and we pulled it off. And after practice, she was like, "You've never rowed towards a day in your life." And I was like, "Oh, but now I have it." She was cool with it, but I was way cocky in that situation. Do you have any examples?
I had sorry, I didn't realize you were done.
I didn't either.
I had a similar story with learning how to pop a wheelie on a mountain bike. Because, well, actually more specifically how to bunny hop. Because bunny hop's really useful on mountain biking because you can get over like roots or rocks or stuff like that, or get on top of stuff if you need to get on something, whatever. I like mountain biking. I grew up north in the wilderness, and that was something that I did with my friends, and that was super fun. What are you up now?
I learned to bunny hop on my road bike, which has tires this thin and no suspension.
Yeah.
So when I bunny hop, it was like crack. And I have to do it over parts of Mathers Bridge because there's grading and there's a really hard metal divide where the bridge locks into the road. Yeah. So I have to bunny hop over that hard divide onto grading on these thin tires. And every time I do it, it's like fucking real sketchy.
Yeah. But my friend texted me and he was like, "Hey, I don't know how to bunny hop. Could you teach me?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I had never bunny hopped. I didn't even know what it was at that time. And he said, "Okay, cool. Like, when do you want to teach me?" I was like, "Tomorrow works." And so I went out at like 8 or 9 p.m. and practiced for like an hour off of like YouTube tutorials and stuff like that, figuring out how to do it. I got it. And I got to him, and then, I showed him what I was doing in terms of the bunny hop. He was like, "Wow, I can't believe you can do that, blah, blah, like, teach me how." So like I taught him how, and he started to get it. And then at the end of the day, I was like, "I have never bunny hopped until last night." And he laughed. He thought it was funny, but that was a funny story. I don't know if it was cockiness or confidence, and I go into a little kind of discrepancy between the two later on that I kind of want to save for later, but just an interesting story.
Yeah.
That, I wanted to share.
I did the same thing at rowing practice. One of the kids' dad, he had this like brand new C6 Corvette manual, and he came to pick his kid up from practice, and everyone was looking at this car. And I was friends with his kid, and he was like, "Hey, Mason really loves Corvettes. You should let him drive it around the parking lot." And he was like, "Okay." And he was like, "Mason, do you know how to drive a manual?" I'm shaking my head no for the listeners. And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "Okay." And so I got in there, and I remember the only experience I had with a manual was riding with one of my friends where the reverse was to the left and down. And so I remember looking down at the shifter, and as I reached for it, I saw the pattern on the shift knob that had reverse to the right and up, or right and down. And I remember, like, as my hand was going onto the shifter, thinking to myself, "Don't go left and down, you look like an idiot." And so I went to the right and down, and I reversed out, and I actually drove around the parking lot okay. Maybe I burned the clutch a little bit, and I was a little egregious with the gas, but overall it was all right. But I remember I was way too cocky getting into the car, and then as I was reaching for the shifter, I had a new piece of information that covered everything up. Because if I didn't, I would have just fucking like gone into second and ride it up on the curb.
To be fair, I have driven stick for many years, and I still sometimes ask other people where reverse is. It is always different. Yeah. But yeah, I see and hear what you're saying.
Dude, my brother's Eclipse
Porsche is, I almost fucking backed into my own car because I forgot that first is down and to the right instead of...
First is down to the right?
Sorry, down to the left instead of up and to the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I because it's a dogleg gearbox.
Yeah.
And I forgot that, and I put it in first, which was reverse, and almost backed in the Miata. But it's funny that sort of stuff. It's like you could drive manual a million times, but I feel like reverse is like one of those things you always got to ask.
Yeah. My brother's has you go to the left and then you have to use your ring and middle finger to lift up a collar on the shaft. Yeah. But the thing is, like, as a 15-year-old, you don't lie to your friend's dad about his brand new car and then ruin it. Like, that's not something you should do. Like, I should have just said, no, would you teach me? And I'm sure he would have taught me or gotten a beater car and taught me on that. Yeah. But I was a little shit.
I think, as a small tidbit, I think BMW has the best reverse walkout of the cars I've driven.
Why?
Unbiased. Because it's not a collar. It's a resistance walk. So it's like, as if you go in first, so reverse in all BMW transmissions I've driven, at least, is all the way left and up. And so if you go left and up, you get into first. But if you go past the resistance point, you get into this like hard angle point where the gear shifter is at a larger angle, and then you get into reverse. And I really like that, because if you're trying to get into reverse quick, you can just go past that resistance and pop it in. But in no case when you're like at a light and just going into first would you ever put it in reverse, because you hit that resistance point and you have to go past that threshold to get into reverse.
It feels weird getting in.
Exactly. Yeah, I really like their lockout setup in that respect.
Yeah, I actually cut the spring on the reverse lockout for the Camaro. I cut it shorter because from factory, they make it really difficult to get it into reverse, because downshifting from 6th to 4th, 6th, 5th, 6th. Where the fuck is my reverse? No, it's over one more, isn't it? Yes. So
I can't remember.
It's 1st, 3rd, 5th on top, 2nd, 4th, 6th on bottom. And then you go over and down to the right for reverse.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to shift from 5th to 6th and you've got to really push it hard to the right to fuck it up and get it into reverse. But if you're just in a parking lot, I don't want to have to push that hard to get it into reverse. So I cut the spring a little bit to make there less resistance just in a parking lot. And now I'm always worried I'm going to shift it into reverse on the highway. But I have written down here that confidence is a great tool that can push you further than you thought you could go.
Yeah.
If you go into something
you're saying confidence?
Yeah, confidence.
Yeah.
If you go into something prepared and confident in yourself, you have faith in yourself, I think that you might even get better results than if you went into it neutral, like, let's see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And cockiness can even help in those instances too. But I think most of the time cockiness is a hindrance and an attribute that's often seen as vain and distasteful. And I personally disdain vanity, which is ironic because I used to be very vain, I feel. And so when I see cockiness, I see it as a major red flag in the, like, so much so that, like, I don't even want to talk to this person. So actually there's someone that we know who we very much dislike because of their vanity. And I don't even talk to that person anymore. Like, I don't even engage with, like, they'll be sitting next to me and they'll say something and I just will stare straight ahead and not even fucking recognize that they're there because of that vanity. Like, I don't respect that person, and it's not even a specific action. It's just who they are. Like, I can pull out specifics, but it's not like, oh, well, like, you really pissed me off because you slept with my sister, right? It's like, you just are not a type of person that I want to associate with.
Yeah. I've defined confidence as evidence and action-backed belief in one's abilities to accomplish something while simultaneously having the ability to recognize one's limitations, and cockiness as exaggerated belief in one's ability to accomplish something and lacking the ability to recognize their limitations.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you want to start going into confidence and breaking down one to the next?
Yeah, let's dive in.
So for segment 1, what is confidence? I have it operationally defined as a comfort in one's ability to complete a task successfully, which is similar to yours. Often confidence is formed by a previous success in a given task or similar tasks. So it's either direct success in what you're about to do or something similar that informs you. So it's informed optimism, kind of.
Yeah.
Speaking Hormozy sense. Confidence represents having faith in oneself, which can decrease anxiety and calm nerves ahead of completing a task, which makes it useful. So similarly, it's evidence-based.
Yeah.
Right?
It's I've actually broken down each one of these into what you feel internally, what is conveyed externally, and what the results are of each one.
Let's break it down.
And so to kind of piggyback off of your definition, internally, confidence is built on the data-driven belief in their abilities through experience, like you said, knowledge and realistic self-assessment. And I think that's an important discrepancy as we get into cockiness later on. There's a lack of self-assessment, and I think that's a really critical component of confidence. And actually, to maybe not on the contrary to what you said, but as a kind of divergence or a different lens on confidence as well, you mentioned that confidence comes from like having a past experience or similar experience that then you're able to utilize as data to inform yourself about this next task that you have at hand, right?
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because kind of to pull back to the bunny hop story, it was more so I had the perspective that I would be able to learn something like this relatively easily and then implement it tomorrow to teach my friend, right? But there was also an aspect of cockiness in the sense of like, I looked at something superficially thinking that I know how simple it is, where in reality there could be many nuances that I don't understand about it that could make it very challenging. So there was an aspect of like confidence where it's like, I know I've gone through stuff before that I've not known how to do and then figured out relatively quickly. So I have the confidence in my ability to learn quickly, but there's a sense of cockiness because I am neglecting the knowledge and information that I may not see because I am inexperienced in learning this task. Does that discrepancy make sense?
Yeah, it's naivety.
Yeah.
Naivety is the cockiness, right? I think that confidence can also be informed confidence or uninformed confidence. So like there's the stereotypical question on TikTok of girlfriends ask their boyfriends, do you think you could land a plane?
Right.
And the guys always answer yes because they're blindly confident. Well, okay, if you're in flight school training and you haven't flown a plane, but you know the steps of how to land a plane, you could have informed confidence to say, I should be able to land this plane because I know how it's done. You could also have uninformed confidence where it's just blind faith in your own abilities. And I think that is different from cockiness. I think blind faith in your own ability is different from cockiness because, well, we'll get into that in the cockiness section, but I think generally speaking, cockiness implies a judgment that you are better than other people. It's a little bit of vanity.
You know, what's interesting, actually, going off of your landing a plane example, I think a funny instance of confidence that a lot of people will know in the podcast or listeners will know as well is in the movie Airplane. It's a guy that has never landed, a Boeing 737 or whatever the hell it is, right? But he has flown planes before. So he goes into the situation to fly a plane. And obviously it's a lot of comedy and funny shit, right? But he goes into flying that plane with a perspective of self-assessment, and actually I would argue a lot of self-doubt because he doesn't want to do it. He has reservations and like his abilities, but at the end of the day, out of all the people on the plane, he is the most competent to land the plane, and therefore he has to muster the confidence in order to go through with the task. Whereas they could have selected another passenger to fly the plane who is potentially more cocky, but they wouldn't have had the experience or actual evidence-based ability to do that task. And so I think that's a really key component.
That's really interesting. I wish we had had this conversation before writing the podcast because I think that the difference between competence, confidence, and cockiness would be really interesting conversation because I hadn't even considered competence, which is what informs both confidence and cockiness.
I thought about it a little bit. But with competence, I feel as though it is so integrated with both that I figured that it would come up in the definition of either one. And I thought that we could draw a better differential between confidence and cockiness. And confidence would kind of weave in there naturally just because it is such a fundamental aspect of the difference between the two.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. It would have been fun to have the 3 C's.
We can still title the episode that.
Competence and cockiness.
We can still title the episode that. But
we could have thrown ego and arrogance in there too. But
that's its whole other thing. I want to do an entire podcast.
I would argue that ego and arrogance to some extent is weaved into cockiness though.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a distinct lack of it in confidence.
Yes.
But competence, I think that we can operationally define as having an ability regardless of how you feel about it.
Right.
Right. So like I am competent in that I can drive home today. I've done it many times. I can do it again. There's no change in variance.
The guy landing the plane, an airplane, is
Right.
competent in landing planes, regardless of whether he recognizes that and is able to draw confidence
Right.
from his competence.
Right.
Right.
And I think that
All the listeners are having an aneurysm as I try to.
I'm having an aneurysm trying to
go
say the
through
right
all
thing.
the different ones. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that having competence is critical in both, because you can have confidence without competence, no experience. You can have confidence with competence, which is, I think, what you would like to be.
Yeah.
And then you can have cockiness without or with competence. So with or without something to be backed up, right? So I have cockiness that I can land a plane and I have no experience in landing planes, but I have cockiness that I think I can do it.
I think the two that are really interesting there are cockiness with competence and competence without confidence.
Yeah.
I think are the two really interesting ones there, because competence without confidence shows a disconnect between your abilities and your perceived abilities. It shows that disconnect, and I think the lacking puzzle piece there is the self-assessment, self-reflection portion that connects those two together, that makes it, effective.
Yeah.
Right. And then with cockiness and competence, there is a connection between, there's a connection between your abilities and what you're actually going to be able to turn out, but your presentation in the form of cockiness is arrogant, or it's demeaning, or other stuff like that makes it seem as though, like, hey, this is someone who's just putting themselves on a pedestal, and it almost discredits the level of competence, because it's like when you present yourself that way, it's so off-putting to people that even if you have the confidence inside, if you're presenting it in a cocky manner, it's off-putting to the people around you.
This really informs my cockiness section really well when we get into it.
Yeah.
What's most interesting, I think, is someone who has competence but no confidence. They've done it before, but they don't believe that they can do it again. And we discussed that in rowing a lot, though not in these terms. And I'm glad that we're discussing this because I can convey to rowers much easier. You have competence. So there's something that we call in rowing called the wall, which is in any rowing piece and any racing piece. Let's say a 2,000 meter piece. Your first 500 meters is your opening sprint. You're full of energy, full of, fucking piss, semen, and spit, and you're ready to go. And then the second 500 meters, you're still going strong. You're at the halfway point. You're good to go. The third 500 meters is where it takes your soul, right? That's like the Goggins style. That's where you take souls. Because you've already done half the race. You're really fucking tired, and you still have another 700 meters to go. And that's a long way when you're that tired. And we call it pushing the wall, because there will be a stroke where you take your stroke and then you go, I'm not going back to the catch to take another one. Like, I'm too tired. It hurts too bad. I need to stop. And that wall sometimes happens at 600 meters to go, or 700 meters to go, or 800 meters to go. And the more experienced a rower is, the further they can push that wall along in the piece to later and later. Because if you can get the wall within the last 500 meters, the adrenaline from the final sprint will take over. So pushing that wall is essentially a metaphor for mental toughness. And to explain mental toughness is really difficult. But I think that explaining mental toughness as having competence but low confidence is a really great way of putting it, because you can explain to someone, hey, you are capable of this. You have done this before. You can do this again, and you can do it a little bit better. Just have faith in yourself. Have confidence in your competence. That's really interesting.
Very interesting.
But I've got a question here as well, which is, do you think that people are born with confidence, or do you think they develop it?
That's interesting. I think by and large it is developed, because I think confidence stems from competence and one's ability to actually complete a task. Now, in addition to that, I think it's very easy so you can look at confidence as a result of competence, right? But then you can look at the presentation aspect, which is why I have like an external and a results aspect to both of these. Like, what is the external way it's portrayed and what are those results end up being? Is because you can your choice to develop confidence or cockiness from competence, I think is an active decision that you make. And you can have, you know, cockiness as a part of competence or confidence as a part of cockiness. Or sorry, confidence as a part of competence.
Yeah.
But I think by and large, I would argue that there are some people that, due to their upbringing or due to the environment that they grow up in, will tend to lean one way more than the other. But I think that, you know, I have the belief that the choices you make in a life are choices, you know, regardless of whether...
Maybe I'm misconstruing myself here. Not are you born with confidence or cockiness, but are you born with or without just confidence?
I think that I think I'm answering the question by I'm answering the question a little bit roundabout way.
Okay.
But in long story short, you are not born with confidence. I think there are factors from your childhood and how you're brought up that could lead you to become confident or to not become confident or to become some other thing like cocky or arrogant or egotistical, right?
So it's nurture, not nature.
It's nurture, not nature. And the reason I say that is because I've seen people develop from one person. I've seen myself, and I'm sure that you've seen yourself too, develop from one person into someone else. So I think that's proof of the fact that you're not born with something and then you're stuck with it for life, right? And then in addition to that, I have the umbrella belief. This is kind of like the umbrella I was getting to, is that there's, I would argue, probably not a single thing that you are born with that you cannot change over the course of time through diligent effort and through hard work, right? And I mean, you see that with people who grow up in super poor families that become really rich. You see that with people who start off, you know, really sheltered in themselves. They don't have the confidence. They don't recognize their competence. And then through hard work and through repetition, they are able to get confident and competent, right? Or bolster their competence with confidence.
Right.
So I think that there's almost nothing that stems from like where you were born or like how you were raised that you cannot change later on. Now, there's an argument to be had of like, how hard is that to do versus someone else who's born into, you know, a better family or, you know, a goes to a better school or whatever, something like that. There's an argument to be had there. But in terms of like the lack of ability to change, I think that's a very weak argument. Like that's a hard argument to make, in my opinion.
I think that mostly aligns with what I have. I think that some people are born more curious or more bold than others. I think some are more engaged, but I think largely it happens as you develop. So I think that winning plays a huge part in building both confidence and cockiness as you grow up. But realizing consequences or loss really informs confidence more than cockiness. It grounds you, right? And I think that as you build maturity, most people tend to err more towards confidence than cockiness, right?
Yes.
Because I think that maturity ultimately is based around respect, which I'll speak about more in the cockiness phase. But as you develop, what are some key things you think you could do to build confidence? Even today, if you're listening today, you're not a confident person, you've completed tasks successfully before, but like you're not humble, but you're not cocky. You're just kind of like, you know, you don't have faith in yourself. Yeah.
You're going through the motions, but you don't have the self-recognition or the self-reflection in order to generate confidence from the competence that you express during the tasks that you tackle.
Right.
I think that's a good question. In my opinion, I'd say that having things like a journal or having things like a plan or having someone to bounce ideas off of or seeing or essentially putting in markers in your life that allow you to check yourself and check where you're going, I think can really build that confidence aspect of it. Because if you have like a plan laid out to do something and you're able to complete that plan, if it's just all in your head, you might misconstrue things in your mind. You might misremember things. You might look back on things differently than they actually were. And so it becomes very hazed, and it can be easily manipulated, right? But if you have something written down and you have like a plan that you tackled each bullet point list, or you have a document that you're working through and you can see yourself building something from that, I think that is in the moment evidence that you can look back on at any time. And I think that's really valuable to see. And I think that, having that kind of anchor point is something that can really build confidence.
Yeah.
But what would you say?
I have it written down as the Hormozy quote of build an undeniable stack of evidence that you are who you say you are, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have...
I think an important aspect to that, though, is that you have to be able to self-reflect back on it, right?
Right.
Because
you
you
have
can
to
go through life accumulating a ton of evidence, right? But if it's all in your head and it's all in your mind, you can twist it in such a way that you will never be able to recognize it effectively.
Yeah. Right. I think that it can be all in your mind, but you have to look back and recognize and give yourself the credit for the things that you have achieved. Right. Yeah. And equally, you can look at the things that you haven't achieved and analyze why that is. But you can't let that... You can't twist it in your mind. You can't give more weight to your losses than to your successes. I think you have to weight them equally, and give yourself the recognition for what you've achieved while also not losing the losses. Like, you can't, if you weigh your accomplishments more than your losses, you become cocky. And if you weigh your losses more than your accomplishments, you lose confidence.
Yeah.
Let's continue with your dissection.
Yeah. So I want to dive in a little bit to external and results of confidence, because I think that there lies a really important discrepancy between confidence and cockiness.
Yeah.
Now, externally, a confident person is someone who is not dismissive of others and presents themselves with humility, yet self-assuredness. So it's someone that is I don't want to use a rhetorical definition for confidence, but is someone who is assured through evidence and self-reflection that they will be able to complete the tasks at hand and to also present them with humility. Because I know that was a little bit of a twisted sentence, but the humility is an important aspect of confidence because it shows that you have proven to yourself that you are capable of the task, and you don't need others' validation in order to assure it, right? It is you have this capability, and you don't need others' validation, which inherently shows that you have self-reflected that you have the ability to tackle it.
Is that how you define humility?
I think I think humility is intertwined with confidence, but I think my definition for humility, I don't know if that would be my exact definition for humility. Humility is the ability to convey yourself without putting someone else down. That's what I would say. And it comes from a place of self-assuredness. I think that's how I would define it. On the fly, I could probably come up with a little bit more in-depth definition.
Yeah, I think that humility is probably recognizing your abilities without disrespecting others, right?
Yeah.
And that plays a role in confidence.
Yes. And that's a very fine line. And I think that only comes from experience and repetition and self-reflection, but also the understanding of other people's psychology, which is something I want to dive into briefly in the external and results section.
Yeah, deep dive.
So the psychological aspect for me of humility is really important. And with humility, you have to understand, as I said, that how to convey yourself in a positive and effective manner, right? And I think that the lack of humility is almost an egotistical conveying of what you feel or what your abilities are or what you can do. And an egotistical nature to me speaks as someone who lacks the ability to convey themselves in a positive manner to the people around them. It almost taints the conversation and the perspective in a negative light. And so I think that kind of boasting would almost be the opposite of humility. It's like a boasting from a light and from a lack of seeing the other person and how they feel. And it's interesting also because although in a person who has humility, that inner voice that's boasting and is
is really, really confident and almost cocky at times, maybe, could be still inside them, but the way they convey it is through humility because they understand the other person on the other end, right? And it's almost like in this definition, I'm saying that humility is it's not a mask, but it's a door that some people have that their expression has to pass through because that boastfulness gets converted into positive expression that is psychologically more easy to latch onto than like a boastful expression. And I think that like door pass through is that humility.
Yeah.
Right. And that the humility comes from the self-awareness of their good and their bad sides too. And maybe there's a part of the egotistical or boastful voice that only recognizes the good sides. And the humility almost grounds that voice in the bad side of things, like maybe like the realistic self-assessment of what you're potentially not capable of. Right. And that helps form that door of humility before it's expressed to the outside world. Now, the results of confidence, unless you want to...
No, go for it.
Awesome. The results of confidence, I would say that people gravitate towards someone who is confident because of their honest and self-reflective nature. And the people who are confident and kind of have this door of humility that they pass their expression through, they create an aura that inspires others and uplifts them in a positive light, rather than what we'll get into later, I take it, with cockiness, which I think it sheds in a lot more negative light, which also shows the lack of psychological understanding of the other person. And then, of course, with confidence, the actual end result, the abilities initially stated in the confident person will match the claims met, at least to a large extent, right? Obviously, there are hurdles or unknown factors that could come in that could hinder that. But by and large, I think the claimed abilities of a confident person match the resulted thing, whatever they're trying to do, task or build something, whatever.
Yeah.
And confident people, I believe, take calculated risks and blame themselves when the problem arises. And that goes back again to that self-inner reflective voice and being able to look at the good and the bad sides of different situations and see what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, and also to be able to self-reflect and really see that if there is a problem that arises or something fails, that was something in them that did that. And that's really important because then you have A, the power to solve it because it's now your problem, but B, you have the power to learn from it because then you can take that knowledge into a future case or a future scenario. People who are confident handle setbacks, criticism, and failure really well because of that self-reflective, blame themselves for problems mentality that I think a lot of those people have. And then they're resilient to other people's perceptions, negative perceptions, while taking criticism analytically for what it is. This is kind of like very middle ground. I understand what the people around me are saying. I understand their input. I hear them, but I believe X, Y, and Z because of this analysis that I have done within myself to understand what I am capable of and what I'm not capable of, or what I think is the right or wrong move in this given scenario. So those are the kind of overarching external resulting factors of a confident person that I've jotted down. But if you want to drop in a little bit more.
Yeah, I think ultimately, just as a quick note, I think ultimately confident people are focused on accomplishing a goal. And so criticism or shortcomings, they can learn from those things to better inform themselves, to give them a better chance of actually achieving that goal. And I think that cocky people usually are less focused on achieving a goal and more focused on being better than the other people in their competition.
Interesting.
I think it's more focused on putting other people down or being better than other people than actually achieving it.
Yeah, it's almost like with a cocky person, the goal is to be better than the competition and not to be better than yourself.
Yeah.
Like with a confident person, your goal is to better yourself every day. Whereas a cocky person, it's to be better than the others.
There's this guy. Have you seen the photo?
That's a really interesting take.
Have you seen the photo of Michael Phelps competing in like one of his last Olympics? And there's the guy. So,
think so.
Michael Phelps has won more gold medals than anyone in Olympic history at this time, right? And he's training for the next Olympics, which is probably going to be his last one. He's kind of getting to the end. So everyone's looking at like dethroning him because like this could be the year. This is the last opportunity to be Michael Phelps in the pool before he retires. And there's this guy, I don't know his name, but all year he's like, I'm going to be the one to defeat Michael Phelps. I'm going to dethrone him. I'm watching all the shit that he's posted. I'm doing better. My times are better. Like I'm feeling it. Like I'm going to fuck him up, right? And mid-race, they are next to each other. And in the foreground is Michael Phelps swimming. And in the next lane next to him, it's that guy staring at Michael Phelps while they're swimming. And Michael Phelps went on to win that race and, top the list of like the most gold medals in the world. But that photo perfectly resembles winners focus on winning and losers focus on winners. And I feel like cocky people are usually more focused on winners or their competitions than on actually winning.
And that's really cool too, because it really shows what we are capable of as people when we focus on ourselves rather than focusing on what others think or what others are doing. I'm sorry. Excuse me, but I think there's a really important discrepancy there, and I think that there is so much power in the individual to be able to achieve anything of their dreams.
That's the photo.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really
Isn't that
cool.
nuts?
Yeah, that's super cool. We can screenshot that and throw it up there.
Yeah,
but there's something inside all of us that is able to really push ourselves when it's a self-reflective person. And there's so much potential there. And that's one of the core fundamental beliefs of why I believe a lot of this stuff is nurture and not nature.
Right.
It is it's not even how your parents nurture you or the people around you nurture you. It's about how do you nurture yourself through this journey of life.
Right.
And so I think that that's a really important discrepancy. Now, I think that we can dive into cockiness a little bit now, right? I wanted to kind of bring up one thing to kind of weave us into cockiness a little bit, the weave, as some have said recently in funny ways. But a while back on the podcast, we talked about Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
In episode, I believe it was 28 of the Anatomy of a Champion episode. I remember that distinctly.
On being alpha.
I don't remember all of them, but I remember that one distinctly.
That's 28.
Yeah, and we talked about the difference between cockiness and confidence. And I'm very glad that we did this podcast topic for this week because back then, I remember we talked about it, and the kind of general conclusion or consensus we came to at that time was that confidence is evidence-backed belief in oneself and the ability to carry through with it versus cockiness lacks the evidence and lacks the ability to carry through in the long run. And I think that we've touched on, although that is true, we've dove deeper into the subject and touched on something really important, that the psychological conveying of confidence versus cockiness is really important too, because it's how do you portray yourself to the people around you? How do you establish an aura of positivity rather than negativity? How do you convey yourself effectively so that other people love you instead of despising you, right? And I think that's a very important discrepancy between the results of confidence versus the results of cockiness that I'm looking forward to diving in our next segment here.
Yeah.
But why don't you kick us off with a little spiel about cockiness and kind of get us going.
Officially, my introduction is that cockiness doesn't seem to be too far removed from confidence. Cockiness can be defined as having overwhelming confidence and ensuring that others are aware of that too. To be cocky is to boast about how good you are at something. This is often accompanied with vanity, with the person implying that their abilities make them better than those they're speaking to. So this is interesting because in racing, in the karting book that you lent me, they talk about how you have to have like an undeniable belief that you are the best on the field, right? So the Max Verstappen has a quote, which is, if you don't believe that you're the best driver to ever live, then why are you on the grid? Like, why even try, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is valid. I think that that's an important aspect to have, but I think that how you choose to motivate yourself with that is the defining factor. So knowing you're better than everyone else on the field is confidence, but telling other people about that is cockiness. Letting them know and putting them down and disrespecting them in that fashion, I mean, it's unsportsmanlike, but also that's what's cocky. That's the cockiness, is how you convey it, right? I think you can feel all of the attributes of cockiness, but how you convey them is what ultimately makes the difference between confidence or cockiness.
Yeah.
It's just all in conveyance, whether you follow through that humility door or not.
It's interesting. Do you think that confidence versus cockiness kind of have two windows to define them? I know that, like, I literally broke it down between internal, external, and results for each one, but I've only just been able to connect these dots effectively. And it's funny because I thought I connected them effectively, but now I feel like I'm reconnecting them in my mind. But anyways, there's a internal aspect of it, like what do you feel inside, and then an external aspect of it, like what do you convey on the outside. Do you think that by and large confidence and cockiness are dictated by how you convey yourself on the outside or how you feel on the inside? Which one do you think weighs more? Do you think they're weighed equally? And how do those interplay?
I don't think that you can tell how someone's feeling on the inside, because the only way that you know how they're feeling is what they convey on the outside. So an interesting example of this is, I think that Michael Schumacher and Max Verstappen and Ayrton Senna were entirely cocky, 100% cocky on the inside, but they conveyed confidence, not cockiness, because they showed respect for their teammates and their competitors. So on the inside, they knew they were the best. They knew, I'm going to go into that corner and either I'm getting out ahead or neither of us are coming out. I'm the best there is. But when they speak about it, they speak largely with respect and they don't really put others down.
Right. So that kind of sheds it from a light of how you convey yourself defines the cockiness versus confidence, right? Now, if I could take us on a little bit of a mental exercise, a little mental journey. If let's say you were dropped off in the Alaskan wilderness or the Amazon jungle, because that's been a recent development, right? You're dropped off in the Amazon.
If this is on survival, you might want to try the Alaskan wilderness. I don't think I'd live in the Amazon.
Let's say you're in a remote place of your choosing.
Okay.
You are alone and you have to survive.
Yeah.
Right? And you have a lot of time to self-reflect. You have a lot of time to journal and look at the stars and watch the animals go around and the trees and blah, blah, blah. And you spend a few weeks there. As you spend that time there and as you figure out how to survive and you develop yourself, how internally do you differentiate between a cocky feeling inside you versus a confident feeling inside you? What internally is different? Or is there something internally that's different? If you don't have basically what I'm trying to frame is, if you don't have the external person there, or you don't have the mirror in the form of another person to talk to that can show you whether they're feeling negative or feeling positive, or they feel hurt or they feel happy, right? When you don't have that other person as a mirror back to yourself to understand how you're conveying yourself, what internally do you feel differently between the two that allows you to differentiate between them?
Yeah, so it's essentially take away the competition. You can't focus on winners because you're the only person there, right? I think at that point, the differentiator between...
And you can't focus on even the crowd, because they're not there to show you whether you're acting egotistical or you're acting with humility or whatever, right?
I think at that point, cockiness is then defined as a feeling of not immortality, but such supreme confidence that you can do something with very little evidence to back it up. So let's take the Amazon jungle as an example. I grew up in Melbourne, Florida, with no experience in the real wilderness or the Amazon jungle, and you helicopter drop me into the middle of the Amazon, right? And I learned to start a fire. Okay, cool. I learned to craft a spear. Cool. And then I learned to fish. I throw a line in and then I can reel fish in, right? Awesome. That shows that I have basic survival instincts down. I have no hand-to-hand combat training. I then decide to use my spear to try to fight a jaguar. That is cocky. because I've never engaged in combat. I have no experience with big cats. I don't know how they work. And this is an entirely foreign environment to me. I have no medical skills if I don't do it right. And I don't even know how to harvest a kill if I were to kill a jaguar. That's cockiness. I think at that point, it's having a unwavering belief in yourself with absolutely nothing to back it up. So I am cocky in that I can land a plane because I have never landed a plane and know nothing about it. Right.
But do you think, so I hear you, right? You use the jaguar example to kind of illustrate a cocky approach to, tackling this jaguar and killing it and eating it, right? Yeah. I would presume. Is there an internal difference that you feel rather than an action that you take that differentiates between confidence and cockiness? And I can kind of go over what I think it is.
The same.
It feels the same.
I think it feels the same, but your perception is very different from where reality actually is. I think with cockiness, your perception is further from the most probable outcome.
It's interesting because I think that they also feel very similar, but I think that there's maybe you'll agree with this too, there's a layer of depth to confidence that doesn't exist with cockiness. And I'll pose this analogy. If you have a pool, right?
Yeah.
And it's, you can't really see the bottom. Let's say the water's murky or it's dark out or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And you have, let's say, two pools. One of them, they both look the same from the outside. They both, have a border around them and the water is the same size and it's both still water. It's very nice. And one of them is a foot deep and one of them is 5 feet deep, right? But you can never tell which one is which unless you actually get into the pool, right? And so the analogy I'm trying to weave through is that when you're self-reflecting internally and looking at yourself, there's a level of depth and understanding about yourself that you experience with confidence as the deep pool. And there's a superficial layer of confidence and ability in the shallow pool as cockiness.
Right.
And when you get in the pool is when you actually portray it to the outside. And so when you get in the shallow pool, you realize,
it's only up to my ankles.
It's only up to my ankles. Like, I'm not this is not what I expected it to be on the outside. So the external people act like as a mirror for you if you haven't built that mirror inside you. And the confident pool, you get in it and you expect the pool to be deep because you can't see the bottom. You don't know how deep it is. So you're like, oh, okay, this is expected, right? And so I think that there's an interesting discrepancy there because I think they feel similarly inside, but you need that those moments of self-reflection or external factors in order to be able to identify them effectively inside you.
Well, you feel the same about...
And that's a good argument for nurture, too, instead of nature, right?
Right, because you're informed by experience. But looking at the pools, they look the same, and you don't know until they get in them. So in one instance, you get into the deep pool, and you go, I knew it was deep. Mm-hmm. And in the other instance, you go in the shallow pool, and you go, oh, shit, I thought this was going to be deep. Right? There's also an instance where if you're cocky but succeed, how do you know if you were cocky or confident? Because you felt the same going in and the outcome, maybe I do kill that jaguar and I go, I knew I would do it all along, but there was no reason to believe I could do it all along. Sometimes miracles happen. Sometimes the unexpected happens and you actually accomplish goals that were not supposed to happen. Yeah. So I actually have this really interesting thought, which is that cockiness is a gateway drug into vanity. And I've got a lot of racing examples here that I want to burn through really quick, but the difference between having success is that was a great lap. Yeah. Having confidence is looking towards the next lap. I think I'll be able to put in a good lap. And having cockiness is I put in a great lap earlier, the best, really. Yeah, I'm about to go out and do it again and show these idiots how it's really done. You're putting yourself over other people. Right now, in this instance, cockiness is backed by the fact that you did put in a great lap earlier. And maybe you do go put out a great lap after the fact, and maybe you do beat everyone. And that's an interesting dilemma because I think that cockiness done right, where you're cocky and then it's actually backed up, can be really addicting. So I've got a bunch of examples here that are really cool. There's a quote from Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights. Here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple. I wake up in the morning and I piss excellence, right? Then he goes out and wins races. That's fucking awesome, right? Right. I rode with this guy in high school. His name was Zach Gerby. And he was like one of the fastest on our team for a while. And when someone would try to talk shit to him, he would say, I can't hear you from that far down the erg sheet because you're that much slower than him. And then he would go and beat you on the erg. So like, that's cool.
Yeah.
Max Verstappen in the 2023 Las Vegas Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc starts on pole, Max starts second. Max passes Charles, and he ends up getting a 5-second penalty for the way that he overtook him. Yeah. And so they get on the radio, and they're like, Max, you have a 5-second penalty from the stewards. And Max goes, yep, send them my regards, and then won the race. So like,
because he won with the 7-second lead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, he had to take his pit stop and take the 5-second penalty, and then he went on to overtake on track for the lead.
I think there was another race where he got a penalty, but he was so far ahead that it didn't matter. It was just a time penalty. It wasn't a stop and go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another one from Sebastian Vettel. Are you familiar with the multi-21 situation?
No, I've heard of it, but I don't know.
Sebastian Vettel was teammates with Mark Webber at Red Bull.
Okay.
And I forget, maybe Vettel was already a world champion at that point. I can't remember.
Back in the Webber days. Good old days.
Right. And they had team orders where if you're running 1-2, we hold position because we want to capture the 1-2 for the team. So they get out there. It's like maybe halfway through the race. I can't remember what lap it was. And Mark Webber's ahead of Sebastian Vettel. And Sebastian Vettel is like on his ass. He has so much more pace. And so the team sees this and they get on the radio and they call multi-21, which is the code word for hold position, right? And Sebastian Vettel then turns his radio off and fucking relentlessly attacks Mark Webber, gets past him, and then goes on to win by like 10 seconds. And so afterwards in the cool down room, Mark Webber was like, multi-21, Seb, like fuck multi-20, like we were supposed to hold position. What the fuck, dude? What the fuck happened? Like, we could have crashed and lost all the points, whatever. And so he got a lot of heat in the press for it because you have to respect team orders.
Mark Webber could have always backed off, though.
Yeah, right.
Held position in the opposite.
Exactly.
He just wanted to win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so Sebastian Vettel is quoted as saying, the bottom line is, I was racing, I was faster, I passed him, and then I won.
Yeah.
So he had the cockiness, and then he backed it up. But there are many instances where cockiness is then not backed up, and you end up looking like a fool.
Before you get into that, I'm so sorry. Would you tell the audience the story about the rowing kid on the college team who was cocky to one of the Lithuanians, and they had an erg competition, and he beat him by a huge margin, and then he stood by the other kid's erg. Do you remember the story?
I don't remember.
I'll tell it. Maybe you can jump in.
Okay.
So there was one of the Lithuanian guys on your team, and there was another kid, American kid. And the American kid was trying to get into the 8, I believe. And he was continuously talking shit about how he could row better than this Lithuanian guy and that he should be in the 8. And, the Lithuanian doesn't deserve the spot. And he was talking shit.
Yeah.
And the Lithuanian got sick of it. And he said, okay, let's erg right now.
Yeah.
Let's erg. And so they both get on the ergs and they do, I don't remember what you said, maybe like a 2K. Yeah, 2K piece. And so they both get on the ergs and they're both pulling. And the Lithuanian guy is just killing this American kid on the erg, just slaughter. And he gets off the erg a minute and a half or like 2 minutes before the American kid finishes, which is like a redonkulous margin. Redonkulous.
Yeah.
And so he gets off and the Lithuanian kid flips down his erg screen and he's like, just don't try, don't bother. You're dead. You're done. And I just thought that was the fucking funniest shit ever. I love that story.
Yeah. And that's a great example of like when you can actually back it up, right? And that's addicting, right? So there are a lot of instances where Conor McGregor talks shit and then fucks the dude up, right?
Yeah.
I have one written down here from 2017 where Conor McGregor is quoted as saying, I'll knock him out in 1 round. And then the fight dragged on to 10 rounds before Conor McGregor was knocked out. So he lost by knockout when he was like, I'll get him in round 1.
Yeah.
So not so hot. Lewis Hamilton, after winning, I think he was about trying to win his 5th world championship, going into the 2016 season, he said, this will be my easiest championship. He's quoted as saying that. And in that year, Nico Rosberg, his teammate, beat him by 5 points and retired as a world champion. That broke Lewis Hamilton's streak from 2015 to 2021. Well, I guess Max.
Yeah, that was the only break in that point.
Yeah. Another one, Kyle Busch, who Caden is friends with, driving with, and thinks that he's faster than Max Verstappen. In 2019, he said, yeah, we'll dominate this year. And then he lost the title. And in 2017, Lance Stroll is quoted as saying, I'm going to show everyone why I belong here. And he proceeded to be Lance Stroll for 5 years. So like, even like when you're cocky and back it up, it's really addicting. And this is an interesting dichotomy because, even at its best, cockiness implies that you're better than everyone else. And that shows a lack of respect for your competitors. And if you're a fan of that person, you're like, oh, he's the best. I know he's the best. He knows he's the best. And he's telling everyone else that they know he's the best too. And that's awesome because I like that guy. And we'll get into this when we start talking about balancing between the two. But if you don't know that guy or are a competitor with that guy, he is actively disrespecting you by saying these things and portraying that level of cockiness. And that's very off-putting. But I think that respect is really at the heart of it. Respect must be given before it's received. And if you're cocky, you're disrespecting your competitors and they won't respect you, even if you truly are better than them.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think of the idea? One of the internal things I have written down for cockiness is that I believe in part it stems from masked insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's insecurity that is unseen to the person themselves, and then is portrayed through kind of overcompensation of ability.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think insecurity plays into cockiness? Do you think it plays into cockiness at all? Or do you think it's just a lack of like self-reflection in that internal mirror and the recognition of other people's psychology and how you convey yourself?
I think that if you have insecurities, by proxy, you also have no confidence. And so
do you think you can have insecurities and confidence at the same time though?
Not in the same field. So I think I can be insecure in my ability to fight a gorilla, very secure in my ability to row. So I'm confident with rowing, but I am not confident in fighting a gorilla because I'm insecure about it, right? Maybe not the best example, but I think that if you have insecurities but want to be confident, it usually comes off as cockiness.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that is because if you have an insecurity, you want to prove to yourself and to others that you actually don't have that insecurity. And your need to prove it to others is a requirement for cockiness because you are trying to prove it to other people, right? Like you want to convey to others that you're the best.
Yeah.
So I think that insecurities can really easily develop into cockiness. But I think that true confidence, that deep pool, there aren't many insecurities there. You have a stack of evidence large enough to combat your insecurities.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Oh, you agree. Okay.
Yes, I think that the important distinction for me is I would agree with the point that insecurities in the same field as like confidence or security are contradictory and not really possible. I think that if, for example, you were to go into rowing and you were to have confidence that you're able to row a good piece and potentially win the race by a solid margin, right? You can't at the same time have insecurity about your ability to get on the water.
Right.
Right? Like those are contradictory. And I think that if a security lies in there, I think that's an important point to look back on yourself and be like, okay, why does this insecurity exist? Is the confidence I have inside me to win this race actually confidence with the mask of cockiness?
Right.
Right. And to take that time to look at yourself. But additionally, I think that kind of jumping off of the racing stuff that you mentioned in regard to cockiness is, sort of on the racing stuff, I guess, but cocky people, I feel like, ignore constructive feedback. Like when they go into a certain situation or they're, racing's probably a bad example for this, honestly, because there's so much bad advice out there. It's, not a great example, but I guess to kind of diverge the conversation more than I anticipated, people who are cocky tend to ignore constructive feedback and have emotional instability when faced with criticism or failure, because I think it's that mask.
Yeah.
It's either a mask over an insecurity or it's a mask over their abilities that they can't see into and understand coherently because they have a lack of self-reflection. And I think that cocky people cope with that inner that internal problem, that insecurity, by ignoring criticism or arguing against it from a self-appearing rational point of view. Now, I say self-appearing rational point of view because I think that cocky people, that mask blocks them from the self-assessment of who they are inside. And so it's like when they're looking into themselves, they hit the wall of cockiness and it bounces back out, and it can't get through to the deeper thing inside them to actually analyze what's going on. And so from them, it's a self-appearing rational point of view because they've never broken into the deeper part of themselves to really understand where their evidence or experience lies, or where their abilities versus, lack of ability lies and stuff like that. And so and I think that cocky people cope poorly with criticism because criticism tries to break through that cockiness wall inside a cocky person. It tries to penetrate it and get deeper into the core, right? And I think that you see this a lot with political debates or any sort of debate. You see people try to break through, into the person they're debating, into their inner belief, and they try to break through that little wall. And when they're penetrating it, that other person starts to get really upset because they're suddenly breaking through the platform that they thought they had, the stable fitting platform, and they're starting to realize that maybe it's not as stable as they thought. And I think that it's interesting to draw similarities between how cocky people, feel when faced with criticism, as well as people who are just generally masked in their ability to self-reflect on themselves.
I think cocky people, by their nature, they need to let other people know how good they are. And their self-assuredness is based off of others' perception that agree with their own perception. So they know that they're the best, and they want everyone else to agree with them. And so if you have someone who contradicts that, and they come up with a critique and say, hey, maybe you're not the best because of XYZ reason, that shatters their own self-assuredness because their pride comes from being the best. And if you have a valid argument against that, that rattles them. But with confident people, I feel like they are more accepting of criticism because they are confident in their ability to overcome it, because the goal is to accomplish that goal, not to be better than everyone else. And to accomplish a goal is a quantifiable metric, but to be better than someone else is not a quantifiable metric. So the argument for who's the best racing driver to ever live will never be settled because you can't get all of the greats from all of history to race each other in a single car. And even if you did, well, Senna's car is different than Verstappen's car. So how can you really equate the two, right? But I feel that, having a conversation with one of those drivers and saying, hey, Max Verstappen has a better win rate than you, their response would probably be more along the lines of confidence than cockiness, because they can rest assured that they know that they are competent in their ability and they were the best of their field in their time. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. They don't
rely on other people.
Self-assured.
Yeah.
It's a point of self-reflection.
Oh, that's what it is. Confidence is self-assuredness, and cockiness is others' assuredness.
Yeah.
Right? It's approval from other people.
Assuredness.
External assuredness. Yeah.
And I think externally, cocky people come off with a lack of humility, as we've covered, and come across as arrogant and dismissive of others, which I think impacts the psychology of the people you're talking to negatively. Additionally, they can come off as boastful or abrasive and showcase superiority while downplaying and dominating others' contributions. And I think that's an important aspect of it. As you've brought up, it's about being better than the people around you, not bettering yourself every day. Right. And then to tie back to kind of the point of confidence where, people self-reflect about problems that occur and make them their problems so that they can solve them. People who are cocky blame others and react defensively, because when they get constructive criticism or failure, it starts to break down that cockiness wall inside of them. And that's something that hurts because they haven't dove deeper inside of them to have that self-reflection to actually be able to grow as an individual. And I think this results in a lack of personal growth, someone who doesn't accept feedback well and is not able to learn from their mistakes as effectively as they could. I think additionally, someone who's cocky harms long-term relationships. It degrades trust because the conveyed persona does not match the outcomes consistently. So there isn't a tie between how they convey themselves and what their results look like. And I think it has a hindrance on, with long-term relationship, in additionally, like successful partnerships, even from a lack of, sorry, Jesus Christ, excuse me, and a lack of relationships from like a boyfriend-girlfriend standpoint, but just like friends, like acquaintances.
Right.
In that sense too, I think it hurts it. And I think after a longer period of time, people who are cocky come across as fake because the outcome does not match how they portray themselves initially.
Right. And even if the outcome does match that, like in the examples where you're cocky and you line up, it's still soured because you're not focused on the achievement. You're focusing on being better than other people.
Yeah, and the abrasive and boastful vehicle that they use in order to communicate with others.
Yeah, it's disrespectful.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Do you
All
want to dive into how to balance these two out?
Yeah. So segment 3 is how do we balance between cockiness and confidence? Is there any portion of either that you should attribute to yourself? So confidence, I think, is a fantastic tool, not only to motivate yourself into achieving goals, but also to instill passion in those that you need to help achieve them. So, for example, if you're leading a team, confidence can be used as a leadership role to instill confidence in others you might not believe, right? We're going to comp. Cockiness, on the other hand, is a great tool for rallying diehard fans of yours, but isolates those who are not competing with you or are your equals. So I have an example here as Andrew Tate, because Andrew Tate uses cockiness as a tool, which is interesting. Most people don't want to be cocky because it's isolating to communities of people, right?
Yeah.
But empirically, Andrew Tate is a successful kickboxer and an entrepreneur, and he's incredibly cocky. So of the people who consume Andrew Tate's content, there are 3 categories. People who are regular and do not know of Andrew Tate, people who are regular and do know and like Andrew Tate, and then there are kickboxers or businessmen who are at a similar level of Andrew Tate in that respective field. And so cockiness will gain respect from his diehard fans, so people who are not on his level but like him and root for him. But it loses respect from people of equal level and loses respect for people who don't know him and are impartial. If the first thing you hear is that level of cockiness, usually it's off-putting because it's disrespectful to other people. This is the Andrew Tate character, not him as a person. I don't think he is that way, but his public persona is this.
Yeah.
But I think that Andrew Tate uses this as a mechanism to stroke an incredibly hot fire within his fans. So his fan base are super diehard because they love him, and when he disrespects other people because he's top G, they believe he's top G, and they love it when he says that because he's letting other people know, and that's real top G energy. So it's a positive feedback loop within it. So it's interesting. You can appeal, I think, to a broader audience by being confident and respectful, but you can develop a really intense, passionate following of a smaller group of people by being cocky. I think it's an interesting use case.
Yeah, that is interesting. I like that you brought up the Andrew Tate thing because I think that his vehicle to get famous is very interesting because it really stemmed from, and this isn't just like our interpretation of it. He's actually said that he used his abrasive kind of cocky persona in order to create, stir the pot in the social community around him to get himself famous and to get to the places that he wants to go.
Right.
I think that's a very interesting tool. The question lies is like, do I think that's the right thing to do? Because I think, I think that maybe to some extent, like, yes, because like it showed results, but then in another way, it's interesting because I see it as like morally abrasive, which isn't something I really connect with.
I don't think there's a right or wrong here. I think it's just as right to be so self-absorbed and so confident and cocky in yourself that you think you're the best and you want to tell everybody, as it is to be incredibly humble and not speak to your achievements, right? I think that both are acceptable. Everybody has their own path that they will choose to follow and how they really feel, right?
I think the latter, though, when you conveyed with humility, I think, at least from a external perspective, shows a deeper person in terms of like their like moral persona. It shows someone, at least to me, it shows someone who's like a deeper, more grounded person.
Yeah, I think it's someone who's more developed and more rooted in the world, but I don't think that makes it a right choice. I think that this more so goes to my perception of right and wrong, which could be its own podcast because I'm nutty. We could have a whole podcast on morals and what we think is right or wrong.
Yeah, we could.
Because mine gets real introspective really quickly. But generally speaking, the opposite side of the coin from Andrew Tate and his cockiness is Warren Buffett with his confidence, because he's very humble. And he often emphasizes learning, listening, admitting mistakes, and qualities that exemplify confidence without ignorance. So he's not cocky, and he's the best in his field, right?
Right. I think that to kind of continue the dive into the balance of these two, projecting confidence without slipping into cockiness is important because cockiness comes across as arrogant and is a vehicle for... It could be a potential vehicle for diminishing self-growth because it creates that barrier from self-reflection, right? So at least from my perspective, I feel as though it's confidence something you should shoot for rather than cockiness. And in addition to the multitude of reasons we've listed over, the past 2 hours, probably, something like that. Confidence additionally fosters assertiveness and self-assurance in high-stakes environments, whereas cockiness provides the illusion that those will... provides the illusion of self-assuredness and assertiveness, but cockiness will break down over the course of time because there isn't that internal, or there's the potential for a lack of internal evidence.
I think another way of saying the same thing is that to be eternally confident, it's all in your head. Do you think you're confident?
Yeah.
But to be eternally cocky means that you have to constantly get positive feedback from those around you. And there will always be people who disagree with you.
Right. And then additionally, I've kind of, as I was building this section, I realized that there's not much, if anything, from cockiness that I really shoot to implement. It's a lot more confidence-based because I think that confidence builds humility. I think it builds the belief in yourself and your skills, as well as the window to be open to learning and improving. I think that confidence demonstrates assertiveness without arrogance, and through confidence, you're able to state strong ideas without putting down others, while simultaneously acknowledging your limitations, which is again really important for self-growth. I guess there's a kind of weaved through theme throughout this that like if your goal, or at least my goal and your goal is, from what we've talked about, is to grow oneself every day a little bit, right? And I think that confidence is a much better vehicle to do so.
Yeah.
It's why I believe it's wiser to have self-assured confidence and avoid cockiness entirely. That's my final point on the blend between the two.
Yeah.
But
I have a little bit of a different take, but before I jump into that, I interestingly, I was trying to find examples for these. So for cockiness, I found Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
For confidence, I found Warren Buffett. And for someone with no confidence and no cockiness, I couldn't find anyone.
Interesting.
Those people are so unnotable, I couldn't even find an example.
Yeah.
Which I think goes to show that both are important. Both lead to some result. And not having either, it kind of makes you unnotable. Right?
Yeah.
Or maybe just not in the public eye. I don't know.
I think you have to make uncommon choices to become an true individual.
Right.
You have to make Hormozy puts this really well, and I'm completely blanking on how he phrases it, but you have to be uncommon to achieve the uncommon.
To be exceptional, you have to be the exception.
Exactly. And I think that it's interesting to bring that up because I see that cockiness and confidence kind of go against the traditional norm.
Yeah.
And so either one can be a vehicle, but, as we've laid out over the hours, there are definitely pros and cons to both. I think it's interesting. It's interesting to look at it from the perspective of being against the norm is valuable in itself, which inherently gives some value to cockiness, regardless of
how it affects external relationships and other stuff like that.
Now let me really break your brain. Because initially I had written down that the best strategy is to embrace confidence and reject cockiness for myself, for the person that I want to become.
Yeah.
And to realize that I'm capable but not entitled to any success. I think that statement holds true. Although I've since come to realize that I don't embrace confidence and reject cockiness entirely. I hold selective cockiness. I can turn it on and off, and I can control it when I need it. And I think that that's important because sometimes I need to have that level of I'm better than everyone on the field. I don't portray that. I don't convey that. I keep it within my own head usually. So like qualifying for the SAE team in our senior year, right? Mm-hmm. I really got there that day, and I really truly believed like I'm the best person here. I just need to show it. But I kept that in my head because I don't want to be a dick to other people, right? But here's an interesting instance in which we both were maybe cocky, maybe confident. I want to know what your perspective is on it. Do you think it was cockiness or confidence? Because throughout our entire senior year, we said, we're going to Cup. And I said that for a team that I was now co-leading, that I had zero experience in, with team members that I didn't know personally, for a race that I had never driven. And throughout the entire year, in the face of everyone questioning it, we, without resolve, said, we are going to competition. Was that confidence or cockiness?
For me, I think it might have been different from either. I think it was the word for like there's a certain word for like when you say something enough times or
it's manifesting.
I think it was manifestation because I think that there was solid evidence that we could go because we'd had a car that was also partially built by the previous team that then we could work from. And initially we felt as though we had a solid team, right? But there was an aspect of like, are we going to have enough people committed, and are people going to be committed enough in their senior year to actually pull through with this, right? So I think it was, for me, manifestation at its core. It's like I believed that we could go to an extent, but I also saw potentially the hurdles we were going to encounter, and in order to continue to manifest a positive light on the situation and to manifest something that we wanted all as a team, we continued to push through and to maybe be cocky about our capabilities or our potential to go through with it. But at the same time, I thought it was a lot of manifesting that belief as well, I think.
So how is manifesting different from confidence or cockiness?
I think manifestation comes from has a little grain of hope in it. Whereas confidence is evidence-based and is analytically based. I think manifestation has evidence and has analytics to it, but it's this little grain of hope of like, I hope the external factors play in, and I hope that the stars align for, X, Y, and Z that we're trying to achieve. I think that little sprinkle of hope is what makes manifestation different.
So do you think that manifestation has that hope that the stars align? Because you're going to do all of your work, but the stars also have to align. But cockiness is saying, I'll outwork the stars.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so good, it doesn't matter what external factors apply because I'm going to get there anyways.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Because then maybe, there are instances in which you're struggling to define whether it's confident. Because I do believe that having confidence in yourself is less powerful than having like a little sprinkle of cockiness or manifestation. I think that there's this little like magic dust in there of like the extra inch, and I think that lies in manifestation or something akin to that.
The reason I also say I think it was manifestation, at least for me, is because I saw signs of potential failure in the spring when we were working. And I saw the team breaking apart a little bit, and some people just caring about graduating rather than actually building the car. And I saw people winding down and losing interest.
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of, are we going to go? But I genuinely, I think even once I realized that, I think I actually pushed harder than I had before through manifestation and through implementing the abilities that I knew I had to really give the best shot of the stars aligning possible, because I really wanted it to be true, right? And so I think there was an aspect of that. I wouldn't say it's cocky, because I do know and recognize that there was an aspect of me that saw the problems, that self-reflected on them. But I think that maybe it's cockiness from a different standpoint, because I masked the problems with manifestation. So it was like almost not like cockiness as in like we're gonna go regardless and we will make the stars align, but maybe cockiness from the sense of like I'm going to be able to manifest past this and we're gonna work through this. And although there's a sprinkle of hope that the stars can align, I think they can align through manifestation, right? So it's almost like using manifestation as a vehicle for cockiness, I think, is the closest way I could describe how at least I went about internally through that experience.
Yeah. I think there was also a level of influence given that we were team leaders at that point.
Yeah.
Because if it was just you and I, and we're kind of going through something similar right now, but if it's just you and I and we're looking at like a major milestone or like a deadline or something, it's really easy to take a more realistic or pessimistic view of it, where it's like, okay, are we actually going to make this happen? Like, is it actually going to work? Because there are all of these extenuating factors that we might not have control over. But if I'm leading a team, I don't want them questioning it at all. I want them working their ass off, knowing that we will get there. Because I would rather sit alone, stare out the window with a cigar, and contemplate whether or not we're going to make it within my own head. Like, do we fill out these documents or tell the team we're not going to come?
Yeah.
I'd rather go through that in my own head and allow my team to work in peace and go through the turmoil myself than even instill the idea in my team that, hey, maybe we might not make it, because I would rather go down with the ship.
Yeah. If you see the cracks start to form, don't hit them with a hammer.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think the takeaway from this, from balancing confidence and cockiness, is to summarize: confidence is key, but you don't need to let everyone know how confident you are.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Cool. Do you have anything else?
No, I thought this was an excellent podcast.
Yeah, I
think this is I think this is the podcast I've had the most fun on, to be honest.
Awesome.
I think I really enjoyed this one. I hope that the listeners like it as much as you and I did, or I definitely very much enjoyed it. I liked it. But
I'm gonna ask Justin if he can put an outro on this one.
Yeah, or send it to me too if I'm doing the long form.
Oh, send you the outro to add to.
Yeah, intro and outro.
Sure.
Because I looked for them on the Google Drive.
Yeah, he doesn't put just the outro, but I'll ask him.
Intro and outro. He made both for us.
Yeah. I'll ask him.
Sounds good.
So we'll end this with a portion that we like to call dialing in. We do a lot of work. We've talked about a wide range of conversations on this podcast, but we're about to get back to work. And so we like to summarize the podcast with a single quote that kind of encompasses everything we've talked about. And I heard this quote from just a girl sitting at the bar a couple weeks ago. I don't know her name. I didn't talk to her, but she was having a conversation on her own a couple seats down. And she said that the difference between confidence and cockiness is the need to prove yourself to others.